Hi there, I'm Jennifer Kirk, and we're out here in the shed, and in response to quite a few people asking for more information in the style of the how-to videos that we've done, decided today to show you a little bit more about how to do scenery for a model railway. Things like hills, even just something simple as embankments and cuttings. So in the corner here of Bolton Trinity Road, we've taken the opportunity to have some cuttings, and you can see on that side there, there's one. Here's one we made earlier in the spirit of Blue Peter. So you can see what we're actually aiming for. It's all complete there with this heaped like earth-like effect with the grass that we covered in another video. Some bushes put on there as well, and you can see as well that there's some rock faces where the angle has become too steep to legitimately model the earth as just a bank, and we've made that using cork bark, which is nice and lightweight, easy to use to cut into the pieces that we want and to glue in. Now if we go to the other side here, we can see this is how it all starts, and we can see we've put in a back piece here. It's just a piece of scrap plywood, and the reason for this is so that we've got something for the scenery to go up to. It's good and firm. It's all screwed in and glued. We're going to wait for that to dry. If you're up against the back of the layout, then it's okay to use it up to the back seam, but say if it was at the front of the layout, you need something to give you the strength. So we've used this. It's all screwed in. And then what we've done here is, out of some scrap bits of 2mm thick mounting card, we've cut some formers. These are just very, very loosely kind of the contours that we're after. They don't have to be accurate. If you've got a bigger piece of scenery to build, you can use pieces of scrap wood rather than cardboard. It doesn't really matter. And you can see here as well that we've the cork bark that we talked about over there, we've glued a piece in here ready, so you can see it's cut to size, and a lot of that will get covered eventually by the plaster, so it doesn't matter that it looks a bit rough from the back. What we're going to do next is we're going to stuff some of these formers with carefully crushed up just newspaper, or any old scrap paper will do, because we don't want to make it as solid plaster, because it'll just be too heavy, especially if you're wanting a portable layout. To fill that with plaster, it becomes very heavy very quickly. There's also a risk that it won't dry out very quickly, and that it may also shrink and crack. So we'll fill that with some paper, and then a thin layer of plaster over the top, and that seals everything in and gives some rigidity. Right, well what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the newspaper in, and then we're going to come back and film applying the plaster. You can use polyfill, you can use plaster of Paris. In our case we're using board finish, which is a bit like wall plaster, and that's just because we've got a bag of it lying around from some building work that's happened around the house, and I like to recycle, so there we are. So I'll see you in a bit. We're back out here in the shed. We've mixed up our plaster. What we've done with this is we've taken a watertight container, something like Tupperware, heaped the powder in. The powder does seem to shrink a little bit when you add the water because it displaces some of the air and a reaction occurs. So put in a little bit more powder than you would think of volume that you need of the plaster, and then we've made sure that that's well mixed in. Now we don't want to add too much water because it will become unworkable, too runny. But by the same token, you're wanting it so that it will flow easily, nice and smooth, a bit like whipped cream is the consistency that we're aiming for. And we're making sure that all of the little pockets of plaster are well mixed in. What you don't want is to get to the bottom of your tub and find that you've got little pockets of just dry powder. So we need to get that all consistently mixed in. And what we're going to do is we've got it's just a wallpaper stripper, and we're going to apply that now over the formers that we put in yesterday. In the meantime, we've taken some crunched up paper to fill in the gaps so that it's not solid, and this makes it a bit more lightweight. On a larger structure you could even use something like chicken wire, staple gunned on and then covered over with newspaper as your basis. Because if you make it solid plaster, you use a lot of plaster, it becomes expensive, and also it's incredibly heavy. So we're just going to smooth this on, and you don't have to be hugely neat. Try and avoid getting it on the track or any other scenic details, because when it dries it's a pain to get off. We're not too bothered at this stage about getting an absolute perfect contour. We can work the material in once it's down here. Now you have quite some time with what I've used is it's called board finish, but normally you'd use something like polyfiller or cheap DIY filler. There's a lot of own brand alternatives that are cheaper and just as good for this kind of job. We're avoiding smearing it all over the rock face that we laid in yesterday, because you don't want it on the actual rock face, so we're just being a little bit more careful here as this stuff goes in. Just getting it in there, work it in. You don't want any big air pockets, because it will slump as it dries otherwise. Make sure all of the paper underlay is covered, otherwise you'll introduce weak spots that at a later date run the risk of you accidentally pushing your finger through. If the wallpaper stripper proves unwieldy to get the plaster into some of the tighter spaces, you can use something smaller. I'm actually using my modelling saw, but you can use almost anything, even down to a piece of plastic card or a piece of scrap cardboard will do the job. But I'm using this because it's here and it's what I've got available. Just got to make sure that we clean it thoroughly once we're done. So we just scoop some of this up, and then we can get much better control and work that in. Don't rush the job, but again, on the other hand, don't labour unnecessarily. It doesn't matter if it looks a little bit like setting toffee. We can always, if you have any bits which really look a bit odd or too angular, you can always sand it later on or go over with a bit more if you're really not happy with it. But as you can see from over there, some of the contours that look odd in the plaster, when covered with the grass and the paint, actually start to look like real contours that real life ground cover will have, so we're not too worried. And what we're trying to avoid is you don't want an angle on the slope greater than about 45 degrees for what will be an earth bank, because that's just not natural. The real world doesn't like steep slopes because stuff will slump and fall, and on the railway that would basically cause an avalanche or a rock fall, which they wouldn't want and we wouldn't want. We're just being very careful now to protect some of the other detail that we don't want to slop plaster all over. And this is again where having the slightly smaller tool is helpful. What I may actually do is use something like a screwdriver, a flat-headed screwdriver, just to get the last little bits in. And at the end here, where the slope dies away to nothing, we just smooth that out and down to the baseboard level. So all we do now is we've got the basic outline of the slope in there with the plaster, and we'll just leave that to dry now. That can take anywhere from a day to maybe even a week, depending on how warm it is, where your model is, and also relative humidity. What you'll notice is it'll change colour. You don't want to try and do anything with it until it's set, otherwise all you'll do is you'll risk damaging your work and have to redo it. So we're going to leave that to dry, and then we're going to come back later on. So we've got a good hard shell here that we're going to get to work on doing the grass layer. This is a little bit like one of the previous videos that we've done, but we're going to go over it again so it's all in one convenient video to follow the instructions. And first things first, what we need to do is take the brown household emulsion. This is a water-based paint, and we're going to put a good thick layer of this over the plaster everywhere basically that we're going to want grass to stick. And you need the paint to be reasonably thick, but not so thick that it runs. If you need to, you can water it down. That's the beauty of the water-based paint, but don't water it too much because we don't want it so runny that it just disappears or soaks away into the plaster. We've got a bit of time for it to sit there and be wet, so there's no real rush. Take on small sections at a time. Don't try and do your entire model railway in one go, because what you'll find is that the paint that you put on first will have started to dry and the grass scatter won't stick to it. And then what we're going to do is, once we've got all of the plaster covered in the brown emulsion, is we're going to start work with the flock powders. And just as it was in the grass covering video, it's the same flock powders from a variety of manufacturers. The ones that we're using, we've got Noch here and Javis, different textures. It's good to have different colours and textures to give it some variety. Don't try and do too much at once, otherwise if you've got big handfuls of it, it'll just go everywhere and you get big clumps. And we're going to sprinkle that and get a good layer over everything, all the paint that's wet, and that'll start sticking to the paint. We're then going to move on to some of the other colours and shades of scatter and just kind of build up a layer. You don't want it so thin that the paint shows through, but you don't want it so thick that the scatter never sticks to anything. Once we're happy with the built-up area of scatter, and we're happy that we've got everything covered, we can't really see too much of the brown paint anymore. What we're going to do is we're going to fix it all in place using, this is extra strong, cheap, own brand supermarket hairspray. We've avoided going for a perfumed hairspray because it just makes everything smell very perfumed. And we're going to apply this gently at first, because you don't want to just blast into a cloud of dust all of the scatter that you've just put on. So gentle spraying from a distance of about 5 to 6 inches, and this just initially sticks it all in place, and then once you're happy that nothing's going to blow away, you can increase the flow of the hairspray and, you know, get plenty on there. Don't be too stingy with it. You want everything to stick in place, and this hairspray will do the job. Once that's all on, you can then build up any bushes with lichen or other scenic material and generally just finish off the area. And that's pretty much in a nutshell how we do the scenery for land terrain. Things like cuttings, embankments, and just rolling hills as well. You can extend this technique over a much larger area if you so wish. Remember, if you like this video, don't forget to like it. If you know somebody else who you think would appreciate seeing it, don't forget to share it. And if you want to keep updated on new videos as they come, then subscribe to the channel to be the first to know what new videos have gone up. I'm Jennifer Kirk, saying you take very good care of yourself, and until next time, it's me saying bye for now.